Hello, and welcome to the Gravel Ride Podcast, where we go deep on the sport of gravel cycling through in-depth interviews with product designers, event organizers, and athletes who are pioneering the sport. I'm your host, Craig Dalton, a lifelong cyclist who discovered gravel cycling back in 2016 and made all the mistakes you don't need to make. I approach each episode as a beginner to unlock all the knowledge you need to become a great gravel cyclist. This week on the show, we welcome Whitman Kwok, founder and CEO of KAV Helmets, back to the show. Whitman's on to talk about the growth of the KAV brand, their expanded production facilities in New York State, and the introduction of the new Aero helmet, the Rhoan, a helmet that was built ground up using their 3D printing technology without compromises. With that said, let's dive right into my conversation with Whitman. Whitman, welcome back to the show.
Hey, Craig, it's really good to be back.
Yeah, I feel like I've been following KAV so closely. Our original conversation, it surprised me to learn that was back in 2021.
I know it feels like the Olympics, right? So every 4 years we have to have a meetup and a new episode.
Yeah, I remember the first time we met in Mill Valley, you brought one of the original prototypes of the KAV helmet in a kind of a locked Pelican briefcase, and it felt very 007 to me.
Yeah, to be honest, we still do that with all our new prototypes and models. There's something about the Pelican case that just adds an additional level of allure to the product.
I love it. I love it. I'm going to refer the listener back to that original podcast because I think there's a lot of great stuff about yourself and your background and how you came to founding KAV Helmets. But I think it's important that we set the stage. What are KAV Helmets?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So KAV, we custom make everything made to order, and the helmets that we make, therefore, are 3D printed using advanced manufacturing techniques. Designed around your head specifically. So we take a single photo of your head now, and from that we can derive a virtual rendering of your head, and we literally build a helmet around you so that it's the most comfortable, best looking, and highest performance product that you could ever get.
Amazing. So I take a picture of my head with an iPhone now, and this is a little different than the process I went through a number of years ago for the helmet. So I take a single photo, send it over to you guys, and then you guys imagine what the rest of the shape of my head looks like.
Yeah, so more specifically, what we're doing is we're taking 108 measurements of like facial and visual measurements off of your head. Each one of those has a high correlation with the shape of your head, the width of your head, the length of your head, the curvature of your head. Any one of them could be wrong, but it turns out if you have over 100 of them and you weight them properly, you actually get a rendering of your head that is at least as accurate as scanning. Because in scanning, the instrument is quite accurate, but of course you have someone like having to have the perfect lighting and a steady hand and the right amount of time, and you have to shave your head in order to get an accurate rendering of that. And we found that honestly, not many customers were that had that level of conviction for our products that they wanted to shave their head to do that.
That makes sense. And then so once you get that basic shape in, you mentioned that you're using 3D printing technology. Some of the listeners might be familiar with it, but it's an additive technology. So you're basically, you've got a material, and maybe you can describe what that material is. And then the printer is essentially printing in 3 dimensions the helmet from the ground up. Is that roughly accurate?
Yeah, that's exactly accurate. Like you're basically building the helmet one layer at a time. There's lots of different 3D printing technologies, but they all have some variation of that in common. And a large majority of them, including us, are printing some type of polymer, some type of plastic. There are some more advanced printers that can do metal, right? But it tends to be exorbitantly expensive for a consumer product.
Okay. And so the end product, as people may have seen on the website, or if you're watching the video stream, I've got one in my hand right now. It's a helmet. It's shaped like a helmet. Obviously, a helmet needs to shape to fit a human head, so it's not surprising that this looks like a helmet from another brand. But can you talk about perhaps some of the limitations that are not present in 3D printing the helmet that enables you to get freedom? Obviously, one of the key ones you mentioned already was I get a custom fit to my exact head. But what other freedoms do you have using this technology?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So, um, the most common manufacturing technology is also typically kind of the most pervasive in helmet technologies, right? It's injection molded EPS foam. And the tooling, like the molds that they need to make to inject the foam into, you can think of it as a cavity, right, that you effectively fill in. They're typically machined. They're very expensive to produce. And so that's why you have these limited number of sizes. It's not practical to machine a solid billet of steel to injection mold a single helmet for an individual. So that's one limitation. The second is what I just mentioned, which is virtually every cycling helmet is made out of almost 100% EPS foam. It's very inexpensive material. It's fantastic for keeping your beer cold, right, for a tailgate party. But the converse is also true that if you're riding, it's trapping a lot of heat in your head. And the traditional way of getting around that, of course, is punching holes into it so that you have vent channels and whatnot. But now what you've done is you have literally a giant hole in this foam object, and you're compromising the integrity, the structural integrity of that. Like foam is not a particularly durable, material. You don't see houses particularly, built on foundations of foam. And so the moment you start punching holes in it, you're compromising the safety. And so for our helmets, where we've developed a very sophisticated variation of these hex structures. You have perfect airflow, but you also have fantastic crumple zones that have been proven in aerospace and Formula One racing technologies. Um, and then finally, the additive manufacturing technique itself allows us to do very novel geometries and shapes that are just not practical with injection molding. Some of those hexes that I showed you, for example, are actually hollow. You would never be able to create a mold that sophisticated where there are hollow parts in it, because you would have to have like sub molds in it that you're like, removing. And it turns out that that's typically just not practical at all.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. It's always been such a fascinating technology for me, and I think it's interesting to see over the KAV journey how perhaps you've accepted more and more of that freedom over time and allowed your designers to really think about the what ifs. And we'll talk about the most recent helmet you just launched at Sea Otter in a minute, but it's been really cool to see. And I love how many doors it's opened in terms of creative freedom for just producing the best possible bike helmet out there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think for us, our original mission was providing confidence in the activities people pursue and saving lives. And the energy management structure that we've been able to develop, like the intricacies, which I'm sure we'll get to talk in. It's not only in the Rhoan helmets, but even in existing Nova and its predecessors, is next level to incorporate crumple zones, managing rotational energies at the same time, in a lightweight, well-ventilated structure where you have many, many variables you're trying to balance. The additive manufacturing actually allows you to do a lot of that without compromising. It's not is it an Aero helmet or a lightweight cool helmet? It's both, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Super interesting. As we sort of trace this journey back from 2021 to now, you started as a exclusively a Bay Area company, and you were standing up your printer farm effectively in the Bay Area and producing all your helmets out of one location. Over time, it sounded like you ended up needing to expand into a new facility. Can you just talk about what that journey has looked like as a company?
Yeah, it's been really exciting. Not just the expansion, but obviously building out the team of like world class folks in their respective disciplines. And I guess I would start with the initial premise that we've always viewed ourselves as a tech company. We've always modeled the business and the manufacturer as a software company. Like how do you have the unit economics, the efficiencies of software, and where can you reduce the capital intensive nature of manufacturing? So we started in Silicon Valley because inherently it's still one of the best places to develop that level of technology, right? That you don't have, it's rare to have that level of concentration of talent in software, AI, material sciences, engineering in general, hardware in one place. And so we built this facility with the idea like we want fully vertically integrated. In some ways, like like Apple, like in terms of the whole customer experience, is encapsulated by KAV, and that would allow us to do things that other people couldn't do. But it also allows us to be very agile, right, in responding to the market and understanding what we deliver customers. Now, as anyone who's lived in California knows, there's what we call the sunshine tax. It's a beautiful place to live, but it's extraordinarily expensive, and actually, the cost of doing business here is also extraordinarily high, which I think you could witness by the number of companies who have like moved headquarters recently. And so it also is not maybe the best place for manufacturing. It just doesn't have the manufacturing legacy that it does as it does on the technology side. And so we scoured the country for like where is a Silicon Valley equivalent for manufacturing. Now that we're at a point where we've built out the fundamental product and platform for development, and we want to scale and do a lot more products, we want to have a world class manufacturing team and facility. And we landed in Buffalo. We actually evaluated three different locations in the country, and Buffalo actually won by a long shot. It had a great talent pool, great infrastructure, and the city and region itself was very supportive of us building the factory there.
Were there some legacy businesses in Buffalo that kind of either no longer exist or currently exist that were kind of bringing these talented manufacturing individuals to market?
Uh, uh, this was to be a roundabout way of answering that question. We found a fantastic facility, right? It's this um, brick building, right? It's a beautiful facade, and it's this incredible contrast of old world, and then when you walk in, we set it up with the latest like manufacturing technologies and tech and everything, servers and everything. So you got the blue lights and then the thing. But yeah, it turns out the building that we leased and renovated and rebuilt is a Barca Lounger factory. It was
Oh
the
my
old
gosh.
Barca, like the old like lazy boy chairs that you sit and watch TVs, and like we were there and looking at these old actually molds for actually the specific piece I saw was actually the lever arm for kicking the seat back. Like we actually had the two sides in the corner of the building that we are building, and so it's hilarious. So to answer your question, yeah, I mean there were legacy. The people we hired didn't actually work on bark
Sure.
launchers, but we actually, it turns out there's our supervisors from a medical device company, and they're actually a couple medical device. So the same thing. They use additive manufacturing, high precision, highly regulated environment, high precision, right? Like it's exactly the type of individual that you would want
Yeah.
to build your factory. And then, of course, he had a great network of people he worked with, and now we have this fantastic team that I would say is marrying old time manufacturing with high tech advanced manufacturing.
I love it. I love it. And for listeners who've been with me along this journey, they've often, I wouldn't say often, but I think in our original conversation, I talked about my love of manufacturing, having run a manufacturing facility myself. And it's so cool to see it happening. And I can't wait, hopefully someday, to visit that factory in Buffalo. I'm sure it would be an eye opener for me.
Oh yeah, I think obviously open door, and we would roll out the welcome mat if you're ever in the area. And it's honestly true to some of your listeners as well. I just appreciate the heads up before you show up.
I love it. When did that facility come online?
It's funny you should ask. It's been online. We've been doing dry runs for weeks now of helmets. We take certification and quality really seriously, so we've been comparing helmets produced there with here. It will officially start shipping customer helmets next Monday.
Oh, amazing. Congratulations.
Yeah, yeah, no. So this is a very timely podcast.
And then just for information purposes, where when we look at some of the bigger brand helmets that are out there today, where's helmet manufacturing traditionally done?
Yeah, the large majority of the helmets are produced in China, from three or four factories there. Um, I suspect with everything going on, there might be some move to try to get some in Vietnam, but the vast majority of them, the only other brand I can think of that's not there would be Cask. I know manufactures their helmets in at least some of their helmets in Italy.
Yeah, got it. Yeah, I hadn't even going into this conversation, I really hadn't thought about pulling that tariff thread, but it's got to be a pretty big opportunity for you guys at this point, given the way things are going with tariffs.
Um, I think we would have won in either case, but and I would never wish this geopolitical environment on anyone or the world or any country, but it is the case that for a long time we felt localized manufacturing was the way to go, and this has obviously just accelerated that. but there's a lot of sustainability benefits to manufacturing locally, and there's a lot of reduction in waste and efficiencies and benefits to the consumer as well,
Yeah.
independent of the tariffs.
Yeah, I would imagine even just the 3D printing technology has a minimal waste footprint when compared to injection molding in general.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, there's the production, as you say, itself, and then there's what we call like dead stock or inventory that goes unsold or ends up being a fire sale on your latest uh, bike retailer website that is indicative of just product that consumers maybe didn't necessarily want but will buy if you cut the price in half or something.
Yeah. Will your new capacity dramatically increase or decrease, excuse me, the lead time for a helmet?
That is the intent. For good or for bad, that the launch of the Rhoan has been our most successful launch yet, and I suspect it will generate some lead time. That there'll be a race between the increasing capacity of the Buffalo plant and the increasing sales of the Rhoan. So it's neck and neck right now, but we do want to provide great customer service, and so we are investing as much as we can in scaling both facilities as quickly as possible.
Will both facilities still be producing helmets going forward?
It will be, although obviously there's a logistics in terms of what side of the country our customers are on, but the nature of the Buffalo factory being like 10x larger in capacity means that it will do the bulk of the production and
Yeah,
intentionally so.
that makes sense. Let's shift gears and talk about this new helmet. I'm excited
Oh,
to hear about it.
yeah, maybe the only topic more than that I like more than the factory. Like I feel like they're all really critical to us. But yeah, we just launched the new Rhoan helmet. We announced it at Sea Otter, and we launched it yesterday, as a Thursday. Um, and the idea here was we've had more and more pro riders riding our helmet across disciplines, gravel, road, and mountain, and we wanted to build basically the fastest helmet possible. And with the motto, speed matters everywhere. But we kind of redefined what speed actually meant, and for us it meant, and I think for our athletes it means more than just aerodynamics, which I think is the common you know theme in
Yeah.
cycling.
Yeah. It's interesting. As a gravel cyclist primarily, like I hadn't really thought too much about getting an Aero helmet myself because historically it felt like a trade-off that didn't have a lot of value to me as someone who's not racing at the pointy end of the race by any means. So when I started to read the specs of this helmet, it was pretty interesting to me because again, this may be naive, but in my mind, Aero helmet was aerodynamic but hot and didn't have a lot of ventilation. Traditional helmet had ventilation, maybe was less aerodynamic. But it sounds like what you guys are putting forth here is a no compromise solution, which is pretty exciting. So, can you talk about it? How do you achieve a helmet that has great ventilation as well as the aerodynamics that you just mentioned?
Yeah, right. So for those who are less familiar, on aerodynamics and cycling in general, right? The traditional trade-off is what I alluded to earlier, which is um, you have to punch holes, right, in your styrofoam in order to let all the heat out. But for aerodynamics, every time you punch a hole, you're creating this opportunity for turbulence, right? Air turbulence, and turbulence slows you down. Like literally, they call it air drag, right? It's because it's literally dragging you back as you try to slice through the wind. Um, so traditionally, aerodynamic helmets you'll look in the market, like they tend to be shaped like a bullet, and they tend to have as few vents as possible that they can kind of eke by, right? That thread of discomfort and speed. Um, with KAV, I mean, the first thing is uh, we we have an open cell structure by default, right? And so what this means, this is a helmet without the shell on it, and this is just to show that you don't have anything against your head. And so I've tested helmets like this where we do have the shell on it, but no formal ventilation. And what I call the passive cooling, right? The cooling of just having the helmet on your head without airflow coming in through the front is already exceptional because the heat can dissipate away from your head in a way that it can't in foam. And we've done tests here. Our structure is roughly 2 times faster, meaning like we've heated a head form I think, to 116 degrees, and it takes twice as long for a EPS foam helmet to cool down to 86 degrees than our helmet.
Since
So
you were holding
that's
up since you were holding up a prop there, so I'm imagining for a traditional helmet, if you sort of imagine you've got sort of bars going from front to back that are holding the structure together, and then as you're holding up that honeycomb, basically there's ventilation at almost every point of your head around, rather than only having 4 or 6 or 8 cavities open up in that EPS
right.
shell.
That's right. So yeah, you could imagine, if you imagine wrapping a honeycomb around your head, but where each honeycomb, each hex is like 15, 20 millimeters wide, right? Like they're large hexes. So the airflow, again, the passive airflow is actually already quite good. The second piece of this, though, is okay. So now it's good by default, but let's make it better. And then the question is, like, what shape, what ventilation like adds the most for the least amount of air drag. So what you'll notice and I'll try to describe this to those who are just listening. First thing is, we were able to have double the area, frontal area of most Aero helmets, or any Aero helmets that at least we studied on the market. And so just stands to reason, like, bigger vents, more airflow, like, better. So that's something that you just feel right away. But we're also able to drop the vent to the very edge of the drip line. And so the venting starts, I don't know what it is, 4 millimeters above the edge of the helmet. This is impossible to do in a traditional foam helmet, because if you have that thin of a piece of foam, it'll break on impact. But because of the additive manufacturing technique, we can just put material exactly where it needs to be. And so the structure is just as efficient as a crumple zone at the edge of the helmet as it is at the top. And this allows air to come like right at your eyebrow, right? Like right where you want it on your forehead, and then go over the top of your head. And so the amount of air is more, but then the location of the airflow is also hyper optimized for the
Right.
individual.
Right, because as you pointed out, like each honeycomb can actually be oriented specifically to maximize performance, because you can do whatever you want within each individual cell.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. And then that's augmented or complemented by our AirFit suspension system. And this may be a little bit more difficult to describe to people just listening, but if you can imagine a padding system that suspends the helmet on your head, and by suspends I mean you don't have foam padding touching your head. The helmet is literally floating effectively over your head. This does a couple things. One, allows airflow uniformly across your head instead of just like where the channels are. The second is the suspension mesh itself is heavily perforated, right? Meaning it's aerated, right? Like if you were imagining like a performance fabric or something, right, with lots of holes in it. This allows perspiration, airflow on your head. You're not putting a foam padding or some type of padding that's like compressing, absorbing sweat, getting icky, and stifling, airflow. And so this turns out to be actually extremely effective, not only in giving you cooling, getting heat off the top of your head, but also the aerodynamics, again, the airflow allows the air that is going through the vents to flow with the minimum amount of turbulence out the rear exhaust. And you get a twofer, right? You get ventilation and aerodynamics at the same time.
Got it. Why don't you hold up the rear of that helmet so we can talk through
Uh,
like how the air goes out at this point.
yeah, so this is one of the favorite features, I think, of many of the engineers here. We have this rear exhaust, right? And there's a kind of Venturi effect. As the exhaust is pulling out of the rear of the helmet, it is minimizing turbulence of the air that's coming off the top, right? And it's effectively kind of rejoining the airflow. So you're maximizing, again, the kind of what they call laminar flow of the air as much as possible. And in doing so, reducing the drag. But also, again, it creates almost like a suction vortex of pulling air out the back. And so you're pulling all the hot air out at the same time. And again, great aerodynamics, great cooling effect. One of those rare kind of twofer wins that you can have with the helmet.
How were you guys able to kind of validate the aerodynamic shape of the exterior shell that we're looking at?
Yeah, this is really interesting, and I'll try not to go geek out too much here because I can monologue this. But we we did the typical CFD analysis, right? But what we found is like CFD has some severe limitations, and particularly when you're talking about a structure as sophisticated as this, meaning at a high level, your model is only as good as how granular, right? You create the mesh of the helmet. For a standard helmet where things are relatively blocky, like you have a big vent, it's not a huge issue. For us, with all these intricate hexes inside and out, you have to either do very fine mesh and run a significant amount of computational time, or you have to make some assumptions. We end up using it at a high level, but we end up just spending a lot of time in the wind tunnel, a lot. Like we went to the A2 wind tunnel in North Carolina. Shout out to them; they're fantastic. It turns out they're also a direct flight from San Francisco, so we would actually fly out on the red eye, spend all day, land at I think 8, arrive at the wind tunnel at 9, do 8 hours of studies, and then catch the 7 o'clock flight back, and then make updates to the helmet, print them out, and then like repeat and rinse as many times as we needed to get to the results we wanted. So for us, that was the way for us to get the most repeatable and kind of accurate results. And we learned a lot in the wind tunnel in terms of it's really interesting. And I now can see how everyone can claim to have the fastest helmet because there's a lot of things you can do in the wind tunnel to make your helmet seem the fastest.
That's super interesting. I'm glad you got access to that environment just to kind of test and validate what you guys are doing.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Like we're quant jocks and data geeks, and so for us, it's all about like getting the data and then making really good decisions off that to the benefit of everyone that rides our helmets.
Were there trade? I mean, there always are, but are there any trade-offs that come to mind that you had to make to kind of realize the ultimate size and shape of the helmet?
Yes. Okay. So, um, cut me off if this gets too long. I think we had something in the order of like 25 or 30 designs up for grabs. We narrowed it down to I think the top three that we thought were that tested reasonably well, and then we started having people ride test them and whatnot. And we took a survey of which three people liked, and we kind of made internal bets. We had one which I'll just politely call Cyclops, um, and as the name implies, it had a singular hole, um, but it looked like a Cyclops from Dungeons and Dragons, right? Like it had I say a look that only maybe a mother could love, right? Or the engineer, industrial designer could love. But we knew it was fast. Like we knew it was really fast. We had some other designs where we are like, it looks sick, like it looks awesome. But there were theoretical compromises from an aerodynamics perspective, like a couple of watts we would lose. So we're like, let's just put it up for a poll, see what people say. And um, yeah, of course, people gravitated, although not as much as we thought, but people had gravitated to. I forgot if the design was K or N, but and the Cyclops got one of the lower scores, and so we had this internal debate, like, do we make the fastest helmet, or do we make the helmet that looks the fastest, right? Like in terms of like what people kind of want, right? Like how much does the aesthetic matter, and how much, like if we're purely being engineering focused, right? Um, it goes without saying, like we banged our heads in the wall. And we're like, we have to have both. Like you have to have like it's got to look great and it's got to be the fastest.
Yeah.
And so we ended up extending our timelines by another month, and we kind of melded in some of the best of both into the helmet, and we're really satisfied with the results. We end up coming out on top, albeit by the error margin from all the helmets that we tested. And if the media presence at Sea Otter was any indication, I think the industrial design team and engineering team knocked it out of the park with respect to the aesthetics.
Yeah. No, that makes a ton of sense. I mean, you've got to sometimes as a tech forward company, you definitely need to take a step back and ask yourself, is the world ready for this look today? Because we are influenced by professional athletes, other athletes we see out on the field and on the trails. So yeah, it makes sense. I mean, at the end of the day, the visuals of the helmet are not a dramatic departure from what we've seen from KAV in the past in terms of that hex shape honeycomb that's underneath everything, but the more solid shell and sort of I think that exhaust exit kind of area definitely looks cool and fast at this point.
It is fast and it's cool, and I love how it makes me feel. It's just a great. It's been so fun to even just test it out, and people ride up to me all the time to ask me about it. So it's been a blast.
How do people decide between the two models you have on the website now? If the Aero helmet is still quite cool and performant, how do you steer people one way or the other at this point?
Yeah. So interestingly, while we didn't do a lot of formal wind tunnel testing on the Nova, the existing helmet, um, like the general theory of what aerodynamics are, it's not lost on us, right? And so it turns out actually that the Nova helmet is only a couple watts slower, which is pretty small in today's
Yeah.
parlance, right? And so it's still a great helmet. It does have a little the back comes down a little further. I know some of our riders just prefer that additional level of coverage if they're doing more mountain biking or technical gravel riding, and it's definitely just a fundamentally different aesthetic, as you pointed out, which we have a certain design principles that we adhere to, right, for consistency across the product line. You'll always know KAV is a KAV, but we do intentionally also make different designs to appeal to different people. So I think the Nova is still a great helmet. I still wear it at least once a week for various reasons, and I love it. But I am a parent, right? Like I'm not going to pick my favorite child.
And I can't remember how long ago it was, but one of the things that really excited me was your customizer. So you see a lot of KAV helmets that are kind of from a colorway perspective are user designed at this point, which is really cool to see.
Yeah, it's super fun. I'm glad we're able to give that creative freedom to people, and it's been a blast actually to see how far people have taken that. People have done designs that I would never have even thought of. Like I just always assumed, for example, the helmets would be symmetric, and we have people who have a left and right different colorways, and I was like, well, actually, it works. Like I would never have thought, but I'm glad we left that open ended enough for people to exercise their freedoms there. So it is
Yeah.
fun to see what people come up with.
I'm always attracted to the orange high vis one. Every time I'm commuting and I wear a black helmet, I'm like, maybe I should have an orange helmet.
Yes, that's been one of our more popular colors for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned that you've been working with more and more professional athletes. Who are you working with on the gravel side?
Yeah, Ted and Laura King have been fantastic. They're kind of the more recent addition. We had the Spratt brothers and Chelsea Bolton as well. The vegan cyclist still does, I think, quite a bit of gravel riding, and so I honestly just feel really fortunate to work with not just great ambassadors, but folks that came to us, understood what we were going, and kind of joined with us on that journey. And I have to, the amount of feedback we've gotten. Like I think I ride and help the product team, but there are nuances when you're doing Unbound or you're prepping for races, like little things. Ted told us the other day he was glad that we made there's a new adjustment mechanism on the Rhoan helmet, and we made it removable just so we could test out different adjustment systems, right, as part of the testing process. And he's like, oh, I'm so glad you made it removable, because when I travel, it makes the helmet so much more compact and stuff. And we're like, oh yes, of course, that was a feature we had intentionally built in. So quickly had a conversation. Engineers like, don't remove that in production. Like, keep that. It was intended just to be a way for us to swap parts really quickly. But those type of things, like I would never have thought of, and we incorporate those little details that make a big difference to our customers.
Yeah, yeah, exciting. And then there's a few other things probably just worth mentioning about some of the policies you have around crash replacement and warranty. Do you want to just flag for the listener what that looks like?
I I would never have guessed how popular the crash replacement policy would be. Meaning, like statistically, I did not realize how often people crash, and I don't know if we attract like more daring riders, right? Like intrinsically, like people are like, oh, you guys make the safest helmet, then of course I'm going to buy that because I do like the riskiest things. I don't know what it is, but to answer your question, we have a 5-year warranty on the helmet. That's intentional. I think the materials that we use in the construction are such that it doesn't degrade in the same way that foam typically would. And then we have a one-time crash replacement policy, meaning if you crash during that 5-year period, we ask that you send the helmet back. It just helps our engineers. Like every crash is unique, and we can learn
Yeah.
a lot from it. But we will send you a new helmet because we also wanted to just honestly protect our customers. I find that some people, I spent $300 or $225 for a helmet. I fell, but I think it's probably okay to keep wearing. We're like, dude, don't. Like, we're happy to replace it. We just get you a new helmet, make sure you're safe, and can go enjoy riding without having to second guess your equipment.
Yeah. That makes sense. Speaking of safety, what what standards are modern cyclists cycling helmets held to at this point?
Right. So there are two standards, and then we have our own internal standard, right? I'd say there's a regulatory standard. CPSC is the most common one in the US. The CE in Europe would be the other one. That I would say is a relatively low standard. I mean, it's good to have at least some standard. It tests, a variety of impact, velocities, temperatures, and locations. I think the threshold is something like 300 Gs, which would be a bone jarring, like concussion, in terms of impacts. It was designed originally for just preventing skull fractures, really, right, versus concussions. The other standard that is not required but has been growing, and I think it's been mostly a good thing, is Virginia Tech has acted as kind of this third party scoring system, and I think it's been valuable because the CPSC standard is a pass fail, right? And so helmet pass is great. Anything you buy, other than maybe some helmets on Amazon, but like the major manufacturers, they all pass, and you're like, great, but you're always kind of left wondering, like, did it just barely pass, right? Like, did it pass on a good day? And so Virginia Tech, does quantifies the score, and it's not a perfect test, but it is a representative test, right, of what a cyclist might encounter on impacts, and and the new Rhoan helmet scores amongst the top amongst the Aero helmets. The Aero helmets typically are thinner on the sides for aerodynamic reasons. And the only other helmets that scored higher than ours have much higher offsets, meaning they're just much thicker helmets. And so I think we were 18 or 20. I don't know. The numbers are always changing, but we're at least in the top 20 of Virginia Tech, and we're really proud of that. We're particularly proud, though, that our internal standard, I think, continues to be very high, and we test for things that neither Virginia Tech or CPSC pick up. And so this is more than you would ask for, but I think you'd have no way of knowing to ask this. There's another organization called helmet.org, which is more of an industry. It looks like Craigslist / Wikipedia, right? Like it's all, like HTML, like circa 1990s, right? But it's very informative. And they tested our helmet as well. And we have no idea what their testing methodology was. Actually, it's not published or anything, but they're like, this is among the best helmets we've ever tested. And we were most proud of that. Like, I don't think anyone even sees that rating, but
Yeah.
because we're like, that is what we aim to do. Like, what is best for our riders, not just what's best because of some third party test methodology, which more and more manufacturers are catering, their helmets to excel at the tests. And we've made explicit decisions. We're like, this will score less on Virginia Tech, but we think it's actually better from all the data we have for the rider. And we're like, we will just take that hit, knowing that it's a better helmet that I would feel comfortable, or anyone here would feel comfortable riding, or to give their friend, or to sell to any of our customers. So,
Have you developed your own in-house tests that you kind of torture test the helmets with?
yeah, I mean, yes. I mean, we have done something in the order of like 4,000 plus impacts that culminate to this Rhoan helmet, right? And that's way more than the dozens that are required for certification. And so we have test equipment here that's proprietary. But as you would expect, we just smashed the heck out of it. Like, like every 2 inches, we're just hitting it, and we're hitting it in different ways, different speeds, different temperatures, and we just do it all day long. And if it's been a particularly bad week, we will hit more things on Friday because it's our way of relieving stress, right? So and we can produce more behind us. Like if we need something to test, we just build it and then just test it. So it is one of the huge benefits of having our own lab, our own manufacturing, and our own design team all in-house.
Yeah. I remember visiting Envy's headquarters and watching some of their in-house tests for wheels, and they were just, dropping a wheel with weight attached to it to the ground in this via this machine and crushing it. And you're like, oh no, it's a beautiful carbon rim that just got destroyed. But I guess that's the work you guys need to do as manufacturers to make sure that we're all safe and can just focus on enjoying the sport we love.
It is. But we enjoy smashing stuff too. So work and play are the same thing. Side story. So we have a replicated rig of Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech was nice enough to share their plans, and we basically built the same rig that they use for testing, and then made some modifications for instrumentation. But our rig, I think, is like 8 to 10 feet taller, so it actually has higher impact speeds. It's like the Tower of Terror. So of course, like you can't resist, but like saying, okay, well, I wonder what happens if a watermelon comes streaming down at 25 meters per second, right? It was such a mess. Like, it's like Gallagher, like just watermelon chunks everywhere. Like, yeah, maybe we should, be a little more discriminate about what we actually impact at high speeds.
I see some great video content coming out of KAV with smashing various items.
Yes. There's this tension of like what marketing, social media, like would grab eyes, and like just our equipment, right? And like who has to clean up the mess afterwards.
Exactly. Well, Whitman, thanks for sort of catching me up over the last 4 years. I've been a fan on the sidelines. I know we catch up from time to time on the phone, which is always great. Congrats on this new helmet. It really does feel like a culmination of a lot of the hard work and effort you guys have put in as a team. And the helmet looks fantastic, and I can't wait to get some rides underneath me with it.
Yeah, likewise. Can't wait to get you one. Can't wait to get everybody one. I think is going to be wanting it. So we'll work hard to keep up with demand.
Big thanks to Whitman for coming on the show this week. Great to learn more about the Rhoan helmet and see the progression of KAV as a company. If you haven't seen the helmets already, feel free to go over to kavhelmets.com and you can check out everything we've been talking about across the podcast. Until next time, here's to finding some dirt under your wheels.